What's up, guys? This is Cory and welcome to CNA Films and Animation. Today is Sunday and welcome to this week's episode of Still in Theater Sunday. Today's review is of Texas Chainsaw 3. Hey guys, I'm Cory.
I'm Alan.
And welcome to CNA Films and Animation. As I said earlier, we are reviewing Texas Chainsaw 3D. Texas Chainsaw 3D, Texas Chainsaw 3D is the first film to come out in 2013, and as with every January film, it's pretty consistent in being terrible.
The only thing consistent, Cory, in this movie is that it's inconsistent.
So, the plot of the story is, it's a direct sequel to the original 1974 classic. It starts right where the first film ended, and it pretty much follows this. Okay, so the story of this is that two people. The film starts off at the end of the first Texas Chainsaw, and it shows a cop. He goes to the house that Leatherface and his entire family lives, and a group of individuals show up randomly, just kind of out of nowhere.
It never explains where they came from, why, or exactly why,
or even really who they are.
Their only intent is for vigilante justice, and that's it.
And so they completely destroy the house, killing the entire family, with the exception of Leatherface, because Leatherface is hidden, basically.
And there's one other person, a baby, who's
taken by a couple who can't conceive baby, or
can't have a child.
Yeah.
While it sounds like, oh, it's a feel-good story, no, because they're about as bad as
the family that killed everyone and to eat them. And from the original film.
Yeah.
And so it cuts to about, what I'm guessing, 20 years or so later. That's another thing we'll get into a little bit. This movie is very inconsistent in its time frame.
Yes, it's supposed to be directly after 74.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, it's the 74 film, but all the objects and background stuff is from the 2000s. At one point, several people have smartphones.
With the timeline, this little girl, the baby in this film in 1974, 20 years later, it would be set in the 90s. 94 to maybe 98 is about when this film should be set. Really, it's probably set in like 2010, somewhere around there.
Yes. It kind of sets it up. It acts at the beginning like it's in the 90s. They're driving a 90s van. Maybe in the late 80s, I'm not sure. But then it just, all this new stuff towards the end, and it's like, did we skip a few years here somewhere? What happened?
Exactly. And so going back to the actual story, this little girl, the baby is now a young woman. I'm guessing somewhere between 20 and 24, maybe 26. Just somewhere around in her 20s. And she learns that her grandmother passed away, and all of her friends are like, well, didn't your grandmother? Aren't all your grandparents dead? I thought so. And so she finds out that she was actually adopted, and she has this other family and this grandmother that left her this house.
Which is rather far-fetched on the adoption. We'll get into that later.
So pretty much the group of her friends and herself go to the house that her grandmother left her, and who was he? The old fat guy. Was he the lawyer?
Yeah, it was the
attorney.
Yeah, the attorney and responsible for her grandmother's home. Pretty much just gives her the keys and says, "Okay, here you go."
Oh, and he also hands her a letter and says, read this letter. It explains everything. Well, of course, she doesn't read the letter, and she and her friends go to this house and pretty much just kind of party, more or less. I mean, they're not partying, but they're having a good time. They picked up a hitchhiker on their way there.
They accidentally almost ran over him. It was in the rain, so they give him a ride.
He's kind of like a wannabe He's like a wannabe Brad Pitt.
Yeah, which they just met the guy, and for some reason they give him they trust him almost instantly. And there's no reason for it. And it pretty much bites them in the butt.
And so they leave him in the house, and of course, he gets killed. I'm not really going to be spoiling too much on that. I mean, There's no surprise. It's a horror movie.
Yeah.
But he gets killed, and they get back to the house. They see that they've been robbed, but they think nothing of it. They don't know that he's dead.
They think he robbed the place and left. And then they throw a party.
And pretty much from there, Leatherface just starts going crazy and just starts killing everyone.
Yeah, stereotypical, one by one, hunts them down.
And so, what do you think of Texas Chainsaw 3D, Alan?
I think it had parts that, with a little more polish, could have been decent. It could have been a decent horror movie, not a great one. I think with a little more polish, a little more thought to the plot, and a little more focus, it could have been a horror film up there with its original, like they were trying to do, but it just fell flat. What do you think, Cory?
Well, this film was... Let me just start off by saying that this movie was pretty terrible, just all the way throughout. I could see where what they were trying to do, in a way, trying to make it a direct sequel to the original, but then, they're throwing out everything that happened in all the previous films there, and there's a lot of inconsistent plot holes.
And they seem to be banking on their audience of having already seen the original. And
Have you seen the original?
I have not. I've seen a couple of the spin-off alternate movies. I've seen one of the ones in the middle. I've never seen the first one.
Yeah, I saw the first one years ago. It's one that I do need to revisit. But it's for a movie that is really just kind of out of nowhere. this movie's not really necessary. It's one that definitely, for a direct sequel, it never really sold itself as a direct sequel.
No. And its theme and its I don't want to say message, because it's not really sending the message, is not odd, but it's, what would you say? It's sending weird signals.
Yeah, I'd say that this film is trying to gain sympathy for the Leatherface.
The Sawyer clan.
Yeah. I think that the film is trying to really gain sympathy for this character, but it doesn't do it very well.
Yeah, and it's hard to get past that he's a cannibalistic serial killer with a chainsaw. But they also try to go, he is a 6'5" behemoth with the mind of a child and an emotional freight train. But it's still hard to gain sympathy for a family who was killed for, if you just start off the movie, it's like, well, this was unnecessary, but they were all cannibalistic serial killers who killed innocent people. We're supposed to give sympathy to them? I don't know about that.
Yeah, it definitely does send some mixed messages. It's one that, as you mentioned to me earlier, it's violent to be violent.
Yeah.
There's no real point to the violence in this film. And mind you, I do know that it is a horror movie. It is a film that is, just supposed to be a splatterfest, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's not even much of a splatterfest for what it is.
Yeah. It's... I know what the film is, but there's just really no rhyme or reason for it. You even mentioned that it was kind of like Straw Dogs.
Yes, to me it felt a lot like that.
The 2011 remake, mind you.
Yes. Not very good focus, not a real solid plot.
And, I didn't see Straw Dogs, both original or the remake, but, from what I hear, I probably won't be watching that. But anyway,
I don't recommend it.
But anyway, this film was just not that great.
No. If you plan to watch it, I'd say pass on it.
I definitely say don't see it in theaters. Just don't waste your money on it. And, it's the 3D even is not worth your time. There's a couple of moments that really jumped out at you, but, really, people?
Yep. And they were all towards the end, and they weren't that great.
So, yeah, out of 10, what would you give this?
Out of a 10, I would give this movie a 5, and I think I'm being generous with that.
Yeah, that's very generous, actually.
As I said, it had some parts that could have been great. It had some ideas that might have been good.
Mm-hmm.
Hardly any focus. Yeah. So, what would you give it, Cory?
I think I'm going to give this film I'm going to say a 3.2.
3.2. Ouch, you didn't like it at all, did you?
Well, it's not the worst film I've ever seen. I knew what I was getting into when I went to see this film. It's not one that really surprised me by any means. I would say that it's just not that. It's not a good film. It's not even really so bad. It's good. I mean, we had fun making fun of it.
Oh yeah, it was a blast making fun of it.
But other than that, it just, I just really couldn't say that I enjoyed much of this film. So, I do think that a fair grade would be 3.2 out of 10.
I see your point, and it is a bad movie, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. 5. It's one of those, if you want to see a potentially scary film and there is nothing absolutely on and you have nothing better to do, only time I would recommend this film.
Okay. So, tell me guys, have you seen this film? If you have, what'd you think of it?
Should we do spoilers or not? Are we done? Are you done talking with it?
I don't really have anything to say.
I have a couple things over there.
Oh, okay. So at this point, Alan has a couple things that he wants to say, spoiler-ish. So if you don't want to know anything about this film, I'd say go ahead and stop this video. But if you really don't care, and I don't blame you if you don't, go ahead and continue watching. Hear what are some things that.
A lot of in these horror movies, the classic ones, they'll have like a line or two that's can really be good and are remembered.
Mm-hmm.
This film, I thought, had one that could have been good.
Mm-hmm.
You learn that the main character, spoiler alert, is the cousin of Leatherface, or as they call his name, Jedediah Sawyer.
Now, don't confuse that with Jebediah. It's actually Jedediah with a D.
Yes, which the line was, "Do your thing, cousin."
Mm-hmm.
It was cuz.
Yeah.
This is right after Leatherface is being beaten up by this cowboy dude.
Best way to describe him, yeah.
And she throws him his chainsaw.
Wasn't he the mayor?
No, I don't think he was the mayor. He was the one that started the destruction of the Sawyer clan. Which, I think it had potential. Just the overall flow of it was, yeah, no. As I said earlier, the adoption thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Makes very little sense because, as far as I've ever seen and know, if you file for an adoption because she was found, you have to label, you have to get everything, paperwork filed, and where the baby's from, the actual parents, if they're known, if it's just a found, it has to be through the place that found her, and all this. I'm getting, and if they had gone to the right agencies, she would have been probably given the next of kin.
Mm-hmm.
And
which would have been her grandmother.
The grandmother that died, because she was the only one left. But, and then she wouldn't have got the letter because they don't like for the old family and new family to get.
Now, what if it was like an open adoption?
It was an open adoption. It might have been different, but there was no paperwork. You learn that the file from the killing of the Sawyer clan, that the baby was never found. So it was this whole thing. It didn't make much sense. They tried to explain it in the movie.
There was also another line that goes with what you were saying, and it really made no sense, at least to me. And it's the girl who's was the baby at the time. She goes, "Well, how'd you find me?" to the attorney, and he says, "Well, you were never lost." As in, the baby who has been missing the entire time. It says so even in documents.
Yeah.
Has never been lost. In what universe does that make sense?
They say in the letter that they get that through research she found out where it was, but that goes to my whole thing on the adoption letters. They'll try to go to a next of kin. They try to stay in the family early on. If the whole family is bad or whatnot, then they'll go to an outside source. Oh, one other thing that's random as heck, the sex scene. It wasn't really a sex scene, but...
Yeah, there's actually no sex or nudity in this film.
None whatsoever.
It's not a bad thing. It's just...
but it hints at it.
Yeah, it's very implied. And, I think that's just kind of formalic for a horror movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a horror movie. There's got to be at least one suggested or, actually shown a sex scene in a movie. But anyway, it's like it does come out of nowhere.
The boyfriend of the main character and her girlfriend, friend, yeah, all of a sudden have sex in the barn. They do a kind of playful thing, like they may have had something in the past once when they're in a rest stop, and that's it. There's no flirting or anything, and then it's just oop, sex in the barn.
Yeah, it really does come out of left field, and it's just, it felt very forced.
Yes. For a film that's Texas Chainsaw, it's supposed to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all of that. I thought the name was silly. Why drop the massacre? And there's only 2 people that die by chainsaw.
Yeah, and I would say that it is fairly consistent with the original in the sense that everyone's killed by the chainsaw.
Well, I hear you, but just you're taking out massacre. You could imply you have a couple people killed with the chainsaw. It's all of a sudden a massacre. There's 8 people dying. With just the Texas Chainsaw, you would think people would just die by that, and it's just mostly the guy running around with the chainsaw. Nothing wrong with it. It's just done oddly. That's what I think of Texas Chainsaw 3D.
Okay, so tell me, guys, have you seen Texas Chainsaw 3D? If you have, what'd you think of it? Did you see it in 3D or did you see it in 2D? Let's see. Have you seen the original? What's your favorite in the series? If you haven't seen it, do you want to see it? Are you a fan of the Texas Chainsaw movies?
Are you a fan of horror movies?
Comment below and let us know.
If you have a suggestion for the next movie we should review, leave it in the comments.
And if you like this video, be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. I'm Cory.
I'm Alan.
And I'll see you guys in the next one.
See you guys later.